Yeah, so good afternoon all. My name is Ronald Fernandez. I am CEO of AIC RNTU. Welcome for this kickoff session of Dream Startup Challenge. So one request for all participants of Dream Startup Challenge. So there are around 30 finalists who have made it to the next level of Dream Startup Challenge. So I request them to just rename themselves. Just write your name slash your startup's name or your idea's name. So just rename yourself so that we can identify, because some students would be also joining. We just want to identify you as a shortlisted startup of this Dream Startup Challenge. So this one humble request, just rename yourself, go in the participant list, click, right click on your name and rename yourself. Okay. Siddharth sir, you're there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So just to start with, I'll first of all congratulate the participant of Dream Startup Challenge who were made to this round, and we would be having multiple sessions before the final. So this is the first kickoff session which we have. This is the sixth edition of Dream Startup Challenge which we are having this time around, year 2021. So before, I would like Siddharth sir to, Siddharth sir is the director of Aisect Group, and he has actually conceptualized this Dream Startup Challenge. He has been ex-chair of CII Bhopal chapter also. So I'll ask Siddharth sir to please introduce what Dream Startup Challenge is and how it's going to go forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ronald, and a very, very warm welcome to the finalists of the Dream Startup Challenge 2020-2021. And, welcome again to the sixth edition of the Dream Startup Challenge, the flagship property of AIC RNTU, supported by CII and the Young Indians. Which was conceptualized and implemented for the first time 6 years back. And back then, we did not have any of the pitch fests or the pitching competitions or even the startup plan competitions. All we used to have were your traditional business plan competitions in the colleges or in some of the other institutions. But we wanted to test the waters and see that if startup ecosystem is here and if it is really penetrating down at tier 2 tier 3 levels, what would be a response from a city like Bhopal or from a state like Madhya Pradesh? And that was the thought with which two or three of us, all of us friends, a part of Young Indians back then, we decided to launch this challenge, which is not going to be your traditional B plan challenge, but it will be a structured approach to provide mentorship, to provide guidance, to provide access to entrepreneurs, to provide access to senior business leaders, and provide access to mentors and investors, all for one purpose: to give advice, the much valued, the much required advice to the entrepreneurs and startups from a city like Bhopal and from a state like Madhya Pradesh. So I would say we've got off to a great start right from year one. And within the first year itself, we got entries from across the state, a couple of them from outside the state as well. And thus started the Dream Startup Challenge, which now has taken a very, very structured approach. I would say it is almost like a curriculum and an autopilot structure which we follow these days and for the past 2 years, in the sense that the entire process of due diligence of shortlisting is now perfected and it's now set. After that, we have we have a roster of 10 to 12 expert sessions which are provided to all the shortlisted startups. There is also an element of one-on-one mentoring and one-on-one feedback. And apart from tweaking and giving feedback on the domain of which you yourself are an expert, the focus of this challenge is more on giving the business part of the knowledge and giving the presentation, financial statements, the pitching, the pitch deck kind of feedback, which was sorely missing as we realized in the past few years, that the startups here have great ideas. They are solving local problems. They are also having enough context for solving some of these issues. But what sometimes they lack is just that basic communication and packaging of their idea, presenting that story well, having that great presentation going when they're facing a jury. And that is what we started working on. And now we are at a stage where we have the access to best of the subject matter experts, and we have also curated topics which are of relevance to almost all the startups every year. And the sessions then lead to the fine tuning of the respective pitches by the startups, and then we have a grand demo day. We used to have it in a good grand fashion offline. I wonder this time what is in store for us. But uh, even then, the promise and the commitment is to get the best of the jury and the best of the investors to devote time and look at your presentation desk and give that valuable advice, which would be very useful for all of you to fine tune your idea and take it to the next level. So that is the brief idea on the Dream Startup Challenge. I'm very happy to see that this is entered into a sixth year. Every year, the endeavor from our side is to make it bigger, better, add more sectors. Now it's almost a national level competition, in the sense we get entries from almost all the states. We have also seen quite a few startups gaining traction, talking to investors one on one, and in some cases, some of the early stage deals also getting materialized in the previous years for the startups who have graduated from the Startup Challenge. We also like to invite the state government and have them be a part of this entire challenge, so that they can look at the innovative ideas which are coming from the state of Madhya Pradesh. So I would like to once again welcome all the finalists. I would like to just say that please make maximum use of this opportunity, which we are all putting together just out of our passion, so that we can benefit the startups and get the best of the people to connect with the talent from our state, and hence in that process create a win-win for the investor or mentor community and for the startup community. I'm also happy to note that Dream Startup Challenge even today remains the most structured approach and the most structured event for getting the feedback and the required advice to the startups. It is not your one-off event which finishes in a day or two, but it is a slightly longer format which also tests the persistence of all the startups which join with us. So welcome aboard the sixth edition. I wish all of you the very best. Please make use of all the experts. Please take their feedback. Please take their contacts. Please try and be in touch with them. Also, the AIC R&TU team has done a fantastic job of steering the entire challenge and competition for the past few years. Please be in touch with the AIC team. They are here to help you, to support you, and to connect you, and to give any feedback which you require in bettering your business plan and your idea. So thank you so much. Welcome once again to Dream Startup Challenge 2020-2021. Looking forward to some great ideas and great pitches by all of you. I would be here to see the inaugural session and the mentorship session kicking off today. We have got some, two great speakers who have been very well, long-standing well-wishers of this challenge. We've got Sparsh, we've got Shashank. I think Ronald will introduce both of them very soon. So thank you so much. Back to you, Ronald.
Thanks a lot, Siddhartha. Thank you. Yeah, so Dream Startup is not just a business plan competition. You definitely have a chance to win the cash prize, but there is a lot other things are also involved. The mentoring, the handholding, the exposure. I mean, people, best of the resources from across the country are available through this challenge, which is called Dream Startup Challenge. So today we have got two speakers. So everybody wants investment. I mean, I've been meeting and interacting with a lot of startups. They want to raise fund. They want to know how funds are raised, but they don't know how to approach and what are the kind of sources available for investment. So today we have got two fabulous speakers. We are starting with Sparsh Kumar. He's from Unicorn Ventures, and he'll be talking about fundraising and sources available. So over to you, Sparsh. Thanks a lot for taking time out and speaking to our startups in Central India. Sparsh. Sparsh, you're not audible. Sparsh, your video is still and your voice is not audible. Okay, there seems to be some technical glitch. I'll just check with Sparsh.
Yeah, I think he's trying to join back again. It will take maybe a minute or two.
Okay. So meanwhile, let me tell you. There would be multiple steps in this Dream Startup Challenge, and so as of now, around 32 startups are shortlisted for the next round.
Sir, actually, there are some technical issues from Sparsh, and he's rejoining in just a minute.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So meanwhile, so Sparsh is back, I believe. Sparsh,
yeah. My apologies.
No problem.
So the internet.
So technology always throws some unexpected challenges. Yeah, stage is all yours.
So Ronald, thank you for thank you for having me here. So I was listening to what Siddharth was mentioning, and obviously it's a great thing that these kind of resources are now available at us, because even when I was trying to do this on my own days, it was not so. The situation in the ecosystem was much more narrow. The opportunities were not as well, especially not for smaller towns, definitely. So yeah, great to be part of this. Anyways, looking forward to kicking off this and interacting with people. I see a lot of people in the participants list. So yeah, hoping for a great interaction.
So we were actually, Sparsh, we are waiting for your session. I mean, you can start speaking to our startups. So we have got around 32 startups who are shortlisted for this challenge. And we have got some IIC students also, IIC RNTU students also available with us. So primarily our audience is startups who are shortlisted for this Dream Startup Challenge. There are 32 in numbers. Yeah, rest are students. So you can talk about what are the sources available for fundraising, and where a startup can approach and how they can approach.
Exactly. So obviously, see, when we talk about fundraising and we talk about how startups can raise funds, one needs to understand that this is a very wide field. What I think my aim would be to cover, especially in this session, would be to cover the aspects that a very early stage startup can reach out to, or the avenues of funding that they can acquire. Now, when you look at fundraising as a process for a early stage startup, it's critical because you have to understand that every company does not follow the same growth trajectory. They all have their own growth trajectories, and obviously how the capital structure. I always give this example, right? How the capital structure, or how the revenues and the growth pans out for a rice mill is entirely different than how it pans out for a company which might be a typical VC funded company, a typical startup that we talk about. So given that in mind, when we talk about people who are just starting out with entrepreneurship, they have to be very focused on raising capital. Now, what are the sources of these kind of capitals? The first and the most obvious source, which people have been using for centuries, literally, is that you put in your own money. Now, you might say that, okay, then that's the obvious thing to say. Why should we hear you? We know that already. While it is true that it's a very obvious thing to say, but people often underestimate the amount, the kind of help that bootstrapping. This is basically called bootstrapping, putting your own money into your own venture and then running it. The kind of leverage it gives a very early stage startup, especially in creating a very small team, getting some initial things to show for example, maybe having 10% or 20% or 30% or maybe 50% of the MVP, maybe having some numbers to show, maybe some sales, some initial pilots, if not sales. That helps. Now, bootstrapping obviously is not an option for everybody. It was not an option for me when I was trying to do this. I'm pretty sure for our audience as well, given what Ronald was just telling me of the demographics of the people that are listening to this. I'm assuming that bootstrap might not be a feasible option, or might not be an option which is feasible to a very, very long extent. So obviously, when you yourself can't put in the capital, obviously capital needs to come into the company somehow, into a startup somehow, because at the end, startup essentially is nothing but a combination of two elements, right? You have manpower and labor, or as it's called in classical economic theory, on one hand, and then you have capital on the other hand, and capital plays an equally important role. So here we start basically with this context of what are the avenues that one needs to focus on. So the first avenue is called the friends and family round, or what some people might very cheekily call the friends, family, and fools round, although I don't agree with that. So this is basically a round where you have to go to your near and dear ones and say, I need money. And especially from speaking from personal context, or maybe with a relevance to the audience, in this stage, when you are in your very early 20s, or not even maybe 20s, some startup entrepreneurs are that way. Maybe going to your family, going to your parents is a very logical thing to do. Obviously, we'll come to the institutional players later on. But yeah, I'm talking about very basics. So going to your family, asking your parents for money is a very efficient thing to do. If you are a bit more grown up, if you, let's say, have a circle, a professional circle, a personal circle, maybe your friends, as the name states, right? Maybe people who are your professional acquaintances, who might be very willing to invest in you, or not very willing, if maybe coerced, shall I rather say, into investing in your startup. And it has to be a very hustling way of raising capital. Especially, I've realized that the earlier at the stage the company is, the more tricky or more informal, shall I say, that the fundraising becomes, because the entire environment is not as structured, the processes are not established. Sometimes the help that the entrepreneurs need in terms of legal, in terms of compliances, in terms of structuring the entire thing is not present. So what other things do we look at when we look at the friends and family round? So when we are doing this, I like to point out some few red flags that I've noticed, especially so that people can have some takeaways from this conversation. Is that even when you're doing a friends and family round, ensure that there are at least some kind of structure in place. See, I'm not saying go do the legal work. I'm not saying go and draft a 100-page SHA. I'm not saying that, but have a very basic legal structure, which can be on a simple page of paper. You don't even have to have a stamp paper. There's a simple page of paper, just detailing how much money has been put in the company, who has put that money into what are the other considerations, if any, right? So basically, that is to ensure that there's a certain level of formality and a certain level of understanding between all the parties involved of what they're getting into and what their outcomes might be. And that helps startups also later on, because and I think this might be the case for a lot of people who are listening to this, is that when we do startups when we are in college, right, or we're just out of college, sometimes work happens how, if I may take the liberty and speak in Hindi, it probably is you gather somebody and say, please kar do, yeah, acha, we are friends, I'll buy you Maggie, and can you just fix this bug for me, I'm having a difficult time doing it, and it happens. But sometimes these promises go beyond that, right? These promises go beyond that and become, okay, you know what, if you're giving me some kind of benefit, let's say in form of labor, writing a code for me, getting some connects for me, maybe just handling interns for me, that is also a job, right? And then you end up promising equity. And in most of the cases that goes on fine, but sometimes it creates problems. And hence, that's why there's a need for a sense of structure into the entire process. So that is all all the time I'll take for the friends and family on, because then we'll move ahead. Obviously, I think if Ronald might confirm, might have a Q&A session at the end. So if there's anything left that the audience might want,
Yeah,
okay,
if
cool.
there are questions, we'll take at the end. Shashank would be also speaking, then we can take a Q&A round.
Understood. And how much time do I have left?
You can speak for 5-7 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that's sometimes for the companies that are at your stage. In case that the formal institutions are missing, the major story, friends and family rounds. But the story is changing, as we mentioned, right? For companies at your stage, you can very effectively explore looking at incubators and looking at angel investors. And we'll also talk about the slight nitty-gritties of that. So first, let's talk about angel investors. Now, angel investors, just defining it for people who might not know about it, are basically individual investors. They might be HNIs, they might be past people who have past experience in corporate, decades of experience, or basically anybody who has a certain level of discretionary, not discretionary, but investable money that they can invest in companies. Now, how to reach out to these angels, right? How they fund, what do they think about? So basically, the brute force way of reaching out to angels and raising angel money is basically cold mailing them, reaching out to them, networking, trying to find out if there are any common connects, people who can recommend you. Recommendations play a key role. That's the brute force way of doing it, right? But there's also a much more efficient, much more smarter way, depending on who you ask. I also agree it's a much more efficient way of doing things, is that going through the angel fund route, angel network route. Now, what are angel networks? Angel networks are nothing but basically mechanisms through which a group of angels come together, and then they ensure that the workload of sourcing and screening startups is shared, and then they take their own individual calls on when they want to invest in this company or not. So at the end, you are targeting pretty much the same target group for your fundraise, but you're just going through a different, slightly different process. So that is angel funding. Now you can also go through to incubators. Incubators also come in many varieties. Some only incubate, as in provide you probably with place, with some expertise, with some in-house capabilities. Maybe on manufacturing side, maybe some capabilities sometimes on human capital side, right? If you need some kind of legal assistance or let's say accounting assistance, it varies. But what some incubators lately, and then even more importantly, have been starting to provide to startups is funding in terms of capital. So generally, ticket size raise is in the few lakhs to a few tens of lakhs, and that becomes a very effective place from where startups can raise money. So till now, we have covered basically, in essence, 3 places: incubators who do capital infusion, angel networks and angel investors in general, and friends and family rounds. These in basic cover the 3 major places from where people can raise money in a traditional way, where you give out money to where you raise money to give out some shares. The other, obviously, miscellaneous places that an early stage company can get money from is obviously government grants, any kind of government schemes, any kind of good faith investments that any kind of institution might want to do. It might be a non-government to government institution. So you always need to keep an eye out. I'm pretty sure Ronald and the other people here who would be much more informed about the kind of specific schemes that or specific help that might be available for a startup in the particular geography in the particular sector. And then when we cover all these things, and then obviously as if the time permits and we go further, we will be talking about how to raise seed funding and what kind of players, let's say, do seed funding. Then here you will talk about companies that, let's say, micro VCs, right? Shashank is here. Maybe he can talk about how they are also doing the kind of bridge between informal ways of raising capital, either through friends and family, and companies that then become bigger and then can raise capital from much more institutional VCs who do later stage of funding. And obviously, there are dedicated VC funds who have a focus on doing very early stage investments. So that kind of, Ronald, I'll stop here, maybe take questions and see how it evolves, and then go deeper into these sections. But these, in essence, will give you a very good understanding of initial understanding of where people can raise capital from in very early stages of their company.
Thanks a lot, Sparsh. Thank you. So we'll take the questions at the end of the session. So meanwhile, I'll invite Shashank Rande from 100x VC. Before I request Shashank to start speaking about investment through lens of investors, I'll request Krati to please introduce Shashank Rande.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. Kindly allow me to give us a short brief of Mr. Shashank Rande. So Shashank has over 15 years of cross-functional entrepreneurial and investment expertise. As the founding member and vice president of VCC Edge, the data platform by VCC Circle, where he led revenue, product development, and growth initiatives for close to 7 years, he has acquired in-depth knowledge. He is very bullish when it comes to technology-enabled startups. Along with being the founder VC at 100x.VC, he is also an executive committee member at PIOCCI. He is also an angel investor and advisor with a keen interest in B2B emerging technology startups. He specializes in scaling up startups, accelerator, angel and seed investment, venture capital, global open innovation, M&A, cross-border transaction, and entrepreneurship. Over to you, Shashank sir, for your session.
Thanks, Krati. Thanks, Ronald, for having me here, and Siddharth. Good to see you, Sparsh. That was a very interesting session you had. I joined in late, but the latter half was very informative. Thanks for that. Thank you all for having me here. What I will do is, take everyone through a bunch of slides, and as Sparsh pointed out, we are a micro VC fund. And we'll give you a sense of how we evaluate companies and what we're looking at the stage we are investing in, which is typically minimal viable product, proof of concept, or early traction. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I hope my screen is visible, Ronald.
Yeah, visible.
All right, great. So, as I mentioned, I'll just give you our sense and our perspective of what not to do when pitching to a venture capital fund or an early stage fund, micro VC, or any kind of investor during a fundraising journey. So, a little about our fund. We are the first VC to invest in early stage companies using the SAFE notes, which is simple agreement for future equity. And we are a SEBI registered category 1 alternative investment fund. We've gone through a lot of companies over the last 1.5 years. We have current portfolio sizes of 39 companies, very sector agnostic. And we are now in the midst of closing our next set of 10 investments through class 04. So hopefully we should be at a portfolio size of 50 to 51 by May first week. Yeah. And so this slide doesn't include our class 04, class 03 companies, but in all, as I mentioned, we've invested in roughly 85 plus founders, co-founding teams, and roughly 450 odd jobs created between class 01 and class 02. We've kind of raised upwards of 40 odd CR. It doesn't include class 03 right now. And we've seen a lot of investors after we've invested as a fund come in through a SQL safe note. And obviously, we've seen participation by multiple growth stage VC funds, family offices, and angel networks, including Indian Angel Network, who've done a shareholders agreement round as a follow-on round for our portfolio companies. Feel free to reach out to us at pitch@100x.vc if you're working on a great idea, and we'd be happy to kind of review and come back to you with our thoughts. So to begin, it takes a wise man to learn from his mistakes, but a wiser man to learn from others. And this is our core advice to most of the budding entrepreneurs from across India, from tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities. And a couple of things which we advise founders to do is, founders working on an idea which is not easy to explain or they're unable to communicate is, I think, a major challenge when it comes to pitching to investors. So they fail to develop a convincing pitch narrative that will attract and persuade investors to fund the idea. And they pitch their technology product, but not a business, right? So you could be a great product manager, product builder, technology evangelist, and a technology person, but if your product doesn't convert into a business and that is not conveyed to the investor, it doesn't really have large impact. A complex idea, though very useful, has no value to customers or investors. They can't understand it. So everything can be built, but it's not necessary to build everything. And we've seen over the multiple interactions we've had with founders, they tend to be excited about the whole landscape if they've stumbled upon an opportunity, and they try and do a lot of things. And our only sole advice is at the early stages to focus and become a category leader of sorts in that one thing you're very, very certain about or confident about. Obviously, when you raise your subsequent rounds and you have the bandwidth and you have the muscle power, you can move on horizontally. But during your initial days, your unfair advantage or your moat is developed on focusing on just that one thing. So the biggest failure happens when tech founders are unable to release the product as they're building it ground up, and they do not believe in partnership and overbuild the product in terms of catering to other set of clients or other set of verticals. It is evident that when you roll out your custom code, everything takes time, and more time than you can afford. Your priorities end up in chaos, and you end up wasting a lot of time. So hence focus needs to be the prime most aspect. And that's one thing which investors like ourselves are looking at in early stage founders, because these are early projects, these are early ideas, and there's less tangible to be seen besides a product. And if the product in itself is all over the place, then there's less chances of the founders getting funded or raising their first check. So startup founder hired people for their track record and not their potential. And this is a common mistake which founders make initially during the early days. The mistake startup founders do is to hire people with credentials, or somebody who's worked as a CTO, as an example, in a very large funded company and not just come back. And the startup is likely to get into serious trouble when you end up hiring such people who they do have the hunger to achieve, but it's always good to have individuals who are okay not to draw a salary in the initial days, and then figure out how they can help you build equity based products. Just give me a moment, please.
So till the time Shashank joins back, if you have any questions, you can either type in the chat box. We will ask those questions to the panelists, or you can raise your hand. We'll unmute you and you can ask the question to the panelists once the session is over. Shashank, continue, please.
Sorry, my son got up. I had to get him out of the room. Uh,
No problem.
so yeah, so and you know, I mean, initially in the initial days, you require people who want to focus on building the product and are passionate about the whole future and helping you lift up from the ground. And if you and hence the kind of people you bring on is very, very important. Some people come with an extra baggage of entitlement, commitment, expectations, and fixed time, and they can't work beyond a time. And uh, the structure of the company is very fluid during the initial days, and you need people who understand the nature and the ambiguity of building out something which is not tangible in the beginning but has a potential to scale. uh, you know uh, we've seen a lot of founders. You've raised a lot of capital, right? And you, or possibly you've had the experience of raising founders. And I can give you a case. I mean, I won't name the company, but there's this one company we backed, and the founders had raised money from Sequoia Capital during the previous startup. And obviously, second time founders, excellent ability. Obviously, there was a lot of confidence, and obviously the product in itself was very interesting, but they miserably failed in the second startup which we backed. They have not been able to kind of scale because they were used to so much money that they weren't able to kind of bifurcate there and allocate or focus on where they want to go, because they were just too overconfident in terms of having raised now the second round for the second startup, or first round for the second startup, but having had the experience of raising two rounds during the two startups. And that kind of puts the founder in a different zone, and that's not a great zone to be in. So too much capital at the seed stage changes the startup team's mindset in unhelpful ways. And shortage of capital in early stage forces startup to make hard choices about what they will build and what they won't. And we are Indians at the end of the day, so frugality is in our system, in some capacity or the other. And our only advice to founders is continue to develop, have the mindset of frugality, at least up till your Series A kind of around, because these are very critical stages of your startup, and it will in effect end up helping you develop a valuation, and which will be a function of what you've built out, what you've kind of gone out and rolled out and try to capture as a market. Building products that no one wants, this happens a lot of times. Sometimes the founders are to be blamed, and sometimes it's just the market and the situation. So all founders have a hypothesis that they're solving a big problem and go all in the basis on initial evidence found with anecdotal success. And it puts you on the wrong track, and you will end up building products with no specific target users in mind. The product the founders could have built out will eventually solve no one's problem. So make sure that your customer, user, buyer, client exist, and they continue to grow and exist in terms of your target market over the next couple of years. So that's something which we look at in terms of early stage funding, or the mindset and the kind of vision of the roadmap which the founders have. Again, this is the same point, that there is no respect for money, frugality, or budgets. So coming back to my previous slide, how you utilize money. So you need to be frugal. You need to understand and efficiently manage. And you are accountable. So you need to consistently, once you've raised a round, or you are looking to raise a round, if you successfully close the round, you are obligated to kind of give updates on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And a lot of founders have trouble understanding that concept. So and also inherent understanding of finance, and developing a mindset for that. So these are very, very important things. You might be a great product guy, you might be a great business guy, but you are building a business. So you need to eventually understand, or one of your co-founding or co-team members will need to understand what is finance, cash flows, and how do you kind of fundamentally optimize and utilize your funds efficiently. So these are very, very important aspects, which in the euphoria of getting funded, founders tend to lose their path in sticking to these basics. And if you're working on building a startup or product, it is your duty to understand the other nuances of running a company, and you cannot say that this is not my domain. So that mindset needs to come in very, very early on. Getting a large contract, a big customer very early. A startup typically gets choked serving the big customer. The more bigger the customer or the contract, the more time it will take to develop and deliver the product. And at an early stage startup, you tend to customize your product or services to the bigger customer. It equally creates a financial dependency. This is a no-brainer, but at the stage when you start out and you're rolling out your first product, it is a tricky situation when you land up a big customer who's willing to pay you, hypothetically as an example, 10 lakh rupees for 3 months, and you're like, oh, boss, this is a wonderful, apna kharcha nikal jayega, salaries nikal jayengi, ऑफिस का बिल निकल जाएगा, ठीक है ना, एक कस्टमर को डिलीवर करते हैं, उसका स्पेसिफिक रिक्वायरमेंट है, we'll try and customize it, as opposed to catering to, let's say 10 companies which are willing to pay you 20,000 rupees. So what happens with this big customers, they drive your product, and that is possibly not the right way of scaling a business, because you've built a solution, you've built a product, and we are hoping that you've built it with this vision that it can penetrate across multiple verticals. And I'm giving an example of a B2B case. If it's a B2B company and you're going after, let's say, healthcare companies, right? And within healthcare, you're going after, let's say, oncology, and while you're building a platform for oncologists, but you suddenly you manage to get one hospital which is saying कि हमें oncologist के लिए भी चाहिए, हमें dietitians के लिए भी चाहिए, gynecologists के लिए भी चाहिए, and you suddenly go off the vision in terms of offering this one client a customized solution which is different from what you intended to build out. And that happens, and it is a natural position to be in when you get suddenly the opportunity to serve, and you need to focus on not getting trapped in those kind of situations, because very early on, if you get into those kind of situations, it kind of stunts your product growth, it stunts your potential to scale. So be very focused, very, very, very focused. There are investors in the market, and we ourselves have invested in companies where the founders were just focused on the product and they had zero customers, and we went ahead and invested in them, to the extent our second most valued company in our portfolio company is a company which we invested in, assuming that hamare seed capital se they will be able to survive for a year, and uske baad they will go ahead and raise another round, because they have zero customers but a great product, and we'll figure out how to kind of get them 2-3 clients over the next 2-3 months. And he wanted to only focus on the product for the 1 month. Lo behold, they got funded within 4.5 months at a great valuation. We got 5.5 crores from a Bangalore-based VC fund, and even then they were at only 2 clients, because the product opportunity was good. So the founder was very clear that I need to build this product out first. Now I will go after the customers, and this is debatable. I know sometimes we say that you need to kind of roll out the product. Spurs can add over here. Spurs, feel free to kind of interject and share your thoughts as well. I'll be more than happy. Sometimes we keep telling that don't wait for the ideal product and roll out, but it's not always applicable. It's applicable in some cases. In some cases where you really want to focus on one product and you want to hit that point to serve one type of customer, one category of customer, and you're waiting for that customer, not to onboard any other type of customer, that inherently creates value. So it really depends on which position you are in. I've also seen on the other side where founders just spend too much time building the product. Jab tak perfect nahi hoga, tab tak hum bahar nahi jayenge becne. That mindset is also not something which we are advocating. So you have to really understand the initial first set of businesses and how it is affecting the trajectory of your product. Very, very important to keep in mind, because once you get funded, it's a very accelerated process, and you need to be very sure of what vision you promised your investors and how you're continuously executing on that. Very, very important. Yeah, I mean, sometimes founders become too cocky. They end up becoming the bottlenecks for growth. They think they can manage everything by themselves. They can't work with teams. They don't trust anyone, and they can never learn to delegate. And these are genuine challenges, because these are different types of human beings, and they have different personality traits, right? And every aspect needs to be looked upon when we are looking at investing in companies, and we look out for those kind of founders who have trouble working with other folks, because you need to have co-founders. And even if you don't have a co-founder, and there have been companies where we funded single founders also, but they were able to work with a team. They were able to bring in somebody from outside and share equity to lead a large role in terms of a CTO or operations. So that development of personality is very important. Developing that mindset is very important. More often than not, we've seen founders who tend to think they can do everything and eventually end up hampering the growth of the company. Raising money from wrong investors with no reputation. Now, this is an important point. When I logged in, I heard Sparsh also talk about the types of investors. So, I like to touch upon this point. It's tough to raise capital. But it's more lethal if you end up raising capital from toxic investors. Early stage ideas are fragile and they need lots of nurturing. And if founders chase money blindly without understanding the background, culture, and intentions of the investors, then it's bound to fail. And I still continue to see businesses. He also beautifully touched upon the equity allocation, and that's the reality of the market. We've seen so many great businesses who've just given it to they've given equity to some advisor referred by a friend, who's not helping them generate any business or adding any value, and not even invested money. And so it basically stunts the growth of the company. Your selection of your first lead investor is very critical, which should be taken on investor pedigree and not be taken based on the investment amount. And unfortunately, that has been the case for many years in some cases. And the objective of talking about this slide to all the audience over here is that Sparsh also mentioned that now you've got access to multiple types of investors. You've got angel investors, you've got angel networks, you've got incubation centers who are providing grants, and also under the Nidhi Prayas scheme giving you initial funding. You've got early stage micro VC funds like ourselves. You've got growth stage funds like Unicorn. The entire value chain system is set up. So the onus lies on the founders now today. With everything available online, you're approachable. They have access to information. They have access to so many incubation centers. The onus lies on them to research and identify which type of investor they want to go. What is the point of building out a B2B product when you end up taking money from your neighbor's uncle who's a real estate developer, as a hypothetical example? And that happens because वो uncle दे रहे थे 20 lakh रुपए मैंने ले लिए, and these are, you'll be amazed that the smartest of the kids end up doing that, because that's they're looking at it from a money perspective, whereas that should not be the case, particularly in the year 2020 and 2021. There are multiple investors and the ecosystem is evolving, where you have the right to evaluate your investor, who you want on your cap table, who you want to raise money from. Because as much as you're chasing money, believe me, and the Sparsh is here, investors are chasing good startups. And there's tough competition for deals as well. So if you really believe that you're building out something good, then research on the type of investors you want to work with, because it's not the money you raise, it's the money you want to leverage the investors network in terms of expanding your market, your GTM, and eventually their ability to help you raise a larger round, whether it's a pre-series A or a series A. In our case, in Sparsh's case, pre-series A to series B, series C kind of a round. And that requires a very systematic approach, and only specialists, which are funds with their entire network, whether it's global or domestic, can help you do that. So very, very important to develop that mindset and be very clear in who you want to bring in to your company as an investor. founders are looking to generate income, not wealth. And I think this is a huge red flag for us, because when we are looking at companies and evaluating, we often directly ask, boss, are you drawing salary? We've heard many people say, no, we are not drawing salary. I've just been, breaking my FDs and putting into the company, and my wife is working, so I'm taking her salary, and we're just building out the product, and we possibly start looking at drawing a salary maybe when we reach a pre-series A kind of round. Right now, the focus is to start generating revenues. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side, we've also seen, yes, sir, main to itna paisa le raha hu. Achha. And how much are you going to utilize in salaries from the fund? 40% is going only in salaries, 20% is for founders, which is not the mindset you want to have at the early stage, because you are building something which is going to be very, very valuable. You're not here to generate salary. Right? If you're looking at generating salary, you should be working somewhere else, right? Whatever money can be utilized in the growth of the company is the mindset you need to develop. So founders end up owning a large share of equity percentage, which is now valuable due to incoming investors. So the focus has to be on wealth creation and not income generation. So that's at least at our level we look at that, and the initial days is very important. Obviously, founders end up drawing salaries and possibly larger salaries in a post a Series A funding, but that mindset is something we look at. We don't mind folks drawing salary, but if you're raising money only to generate a salary, that's a red flag. So understand what entrepreneurship is all about, and why you started out to build out a startup. Too many revenue models, multiple directions, and everyone is your customer. I think I've already touched upon this earlier as well. The same thing, seed stage startups trying to ape large corporate businesses by being, by offering everything to everyone, and obviously it will not scale. You will not be able to build an expertise or a moat or an unfair advantage, nor create a leadership position. You will not be able to kind of, in your objective of satisfying every customer, you end up burning capital in creating multiple products, multiple SKUs and offerings, which will be of no use, because then you're just another player. So they end up becoming a bespoke services businesses or a living dead startup, and those startups never get funded. Even if you manage to raise the first round of funding, you will not be looked upon by growth stage investors. Again, I've touched upon this. They found some of the founders end up throwing money on buying technology and people, building a world-class product. Again, coming back to the frugality aspect, seed stage startups trying to perfect the product in their first year without customer engagement or user is a recipe for disaster. So you need to kind of understand who is going to be buying your product. Be it of free or paid does not matter at an early stage. If there is no customer validation for the MVP, the capital invested is a write-off, at least from our kind of investors. And many founders, to keep investors happy, validate the minimal viable product from investors is also planning for failure. So you can't possibly validate your product from an investor's mindset. You need to go out and need to get some paying customers preferred, but even if you get to test your, let's say, B2B offering for a free POC with two large corporates, and get some sense of validation, it's very important. Investors are not your customers, and hence getting their perspective on product is not the right approach. There are cost and pricing issues, weak business model, and Me Too offerings. And this is something I am personally okay with, as long as you have put your mind to it, because we agree that sometimes you might not be able to build out a perfect business plan, but at least having that vision that you've thought through it, and this is what you believe, this is the pricing you want to begin with, this is your projected revenue. That mindset is very, very important. So the brightest of the idea will fail if there is no visible plan to make money. So plan could be wrong, but we need to see the plan so that we can guide you on that plan. The so-called cool, unique, and noble idea out to change the world cannot survive by having perpetual losses with the use of venture capital. There has to be a visible path to profitability, and you need to show that sense during your pitching, or rather the subsequent discussions when you get into with an investor who's interested in investing in your company. There is no moat, unique IP, or barriers to entry. Obviously, out of enthusiasm and euphoria, founders end up building, hum ek aur Flipkart bana rahe hain. That doesn't make any sense. So there's no moat in that. But if you come up to us and say, we are building an e-commerce portal which is only focused on healthcare products, that's interesting. So there's some focus, right? So try and develop a moat, see how unique you are. Startups whose product, business, and services can be easily replicated find themselves amongst a lot of competition. And they get out competed by other entrants in the market who are heavily funded as well. Some startups do not have any unfair advantage. They are either copycats of big existing businesses with no unique value proposition or no direction to become a leader. So these startups will fail because they can't fight competition. Again, Sparsh has already covered this. I'll briefly touch upon this. Not careful with the equity allocation at seed stage. And this is something which we look at because if it's already heavily diluted, we will not invest despite the fact it's a great product or a great team. So startup founders are vulnerable in the early stage and end up doling out large chunks of double-digit free / consultants / advisor equity without understanding the importance of cap table. These equity granted without vesting and without any understanding of the buyback options, it can be very, very dangerous. Seeing the cap table with heavy dilution will typically drive venture capital away. In some cases, it won't because late stage venture capitals come in, when there are other investors as well. But they come in when you've really scaled, right? When you have become big, when there's a continuous month-on-month growth. But agar shuru ke andar hi aapne dilute kar liya, so you typically then VCs are like, fine, but show me the growth, then I'll come. But that's not the case, right? So it becomes a little entangled because you've given equity to large sums of advisors free of cost. The growth VCs are saying, fine, but show me the growth and I will come. And micro VCs will question that we cannot invest because you just heavily diluted and we don't invest in these kind of companies. So it becomes a very catch-22 situation. So you need to be very, very careful on this thing unless you're building a lifestyle business and you don't choose to and you don't intend to raise venture capital money. Compensation by equity is the costliest, my friends, and you need to be very, very careful about that. So again, always have your elevator pitch ready when you're presenting to investors. Like anything else, practice makes perfect. Remember how you say it. It's just as important as what you say. And convert your product to business. I've already touched upon this. Have that mindset that you're building a business, and that should resonate with the investors because they are investing into a business which will make profit, right? So that's how their mathematics and their thinking is going on when they're evaluating your company. Again, when founders are pitching something, what VCs are hearing, eventually what VCs are hearing is how much money can be made. And if you only talk about the product and the IP and not being able to build it into a business, it wouldn't make any sense, despite the fact you might have a great product. So with that, I come to an end. Just to summarize, we are, as I mentioned, an early stage fund. We typically look at 5 things when we're investing in companies broadly. Founding team, market size opportunity, business model strength, unfair advantage and moat, and obviously hoping that we can make a minimum of 20x returns on these investments which we are intending to invest into. And we are a discovery fund of sorts. We are the first institutional check in our portfolio companies. We invest in classes, so we've done 20 investments in class 01, 9 investments in class 02, and class 03 we did 10 investments, and very sector agnostic: health tech, fintech, wellness, SaaS, vertical, commerce, and deep tech. And currently, actually, applications are closed for class 04 because we're just closing the next set of 10 to 11 investments, and hopefully we should be announcing a class 05 applications sometime in April end. And then we work very closely with the founders and help them get more metric driven so that they are able to kind of expand their market and then raise a future round. We make all our investments through SAFE instrument, which is India's simple agreement for future equity. And feel free to reach out to us at pitch@100x.vc. So I'm open to any questions. And once again, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, Shashank. That was very informative. I believe a lot of clarity startups would have got, because a lot of startups in this Dream Startup Challenge are early stage startups. So I believe they would have got a lot of clarity from your and first session how to approach for investment. So Ayush and Krati, I'll request you to coordinate if some startups or students have any questions, they can definitely put it to the panelist. So I can see few hand raised.
Meanwhile, I request Krati, there's one question in Q&A section. Can you please read it?
Yeah, I'll just do that. So we have a question that is, what do you think is a safe equity that could be shared with the lead investor, mainly for an early startup?
So it's open to Sparsh or Shashank, anybody who want to take it.
I mean, really depends on what ticket size the investor is putting in. What stage are you picking up the money at? Whether you're an MVP or early traction, but typically during your first rounds, anywhere between 3 to 10% should be okay. And again, this is very debatable, in terms of check sizes. A growth VC fund, and your Sparsh can correct me if I'm wrong, typically comes in at a 20%, 15% upwards dilution, where at least there's significant growth. At least I'm assuming 1 crore ARR or 2 crore in ARR in terms of revenue. So really depends. It's not the question of equity. I think what you need to focus on, where are you in terms of your journey? So if you've built out a product and you have 0 customers, then what kind of capital are you looking at? There are incubation centers where you can apply for grant and get 25 lakh, 30 lakhs, who can expedite this process of helping you, providing the initial capital and help you with initial connects. Or you continue to kind of work through incubation centers and then try and get revenue from first set of clients, which inherently increases your value. I'm not saying assign a valuation, but inherently increases the value of your company in the mind of an investor. But there is it's a function of where you are in your journey. There's no fixed number which can be assigned to that kind of question in my mind right now, but Sparsh can add.
I believe Sparsh, is connecting back. Sparsh, you have something to add? Sparsh, you have something to add?
Yeah, so sorry, I think I'm having difficulty with my internet connection, but so basically, as Shashank was saying, pretty much right, high single digit would be a good ballpark. And as he mentioned correctly, and as you go later in your investment life cycle, obviously that number changes, and that number changes from how much the ticket size is, as he mentioned, and obviously the stage at which you are and the valuation at which you're raising the capital. That being said, generally at Series A or pre-Series A stage, I have generally seen very low double-digit dilutions. So I'm seen in general for a modest enough ticket size. Obviously, there are always outliers where some international VC has put 20 million on the first round and they've taken 35%, 40%. But those are like oddities, obviously. But in general, anywhere from a high single digit to a very low double-digit figure, I've generally seen, and that's kind of the market standard.
Yeah, thank you. Krati, we have a few more questions in the Q&A section. Yeah.
So the next question is, as a healthcare startup, what kind of investors preferably should be approached? Those who are into healthcare or understand healthcare, or just anyone?
I mean, it really depends what kind of healthcare startup you are. If you're a hardware startup, or if you're a marketplace for healthcare, it depends. There are healthcare focused funds, and those are Sparsh, you can add. As far as I know, there's Asia Healthcare Fund. There are 2-3 healthcare funds which are later stage funds. At the early stage, I think most of us are sector agnostic. Some of them might focus on hardware, some of them might not focus on hardware. So it boils down to which healthcare segment you are in. At the end of the day, my perception is that there are a lot of funds. Unicorn, there's Nexus, and the bunch of others who do invest in healthcare and health tech. But if you go back and you look at certain hardware-based funds and you require deeper penetration, then there are specific funds like Asia Healthcare Fund and some of others who are later stage funds. So it really depends. But Sparsh, your answer.
Yeah, like pretty much Shank covered it. Anyways, see, at the end of the day, what you need to understand that I think it would be if the three options that were there, it would be like somebody who has understanding, because anyways, investors themselves generally don't do the business because if they wanted to be entrepreneurs, they'd be entrepreneurs, they'd not be investors, right? So at the end, it's not a criteria that the person himself or herself should be a operator.
Persh, I think you are facing connectivity issue. Your voice was cracking.
Let's say creating a hospital management system. It's fine. Basically, Shashank covered it pretty much correct.
Okay. Yeah, Kriti, go ahead.
Yeah, just a minute, Krati. I guess the question is asked by Mr. Mahesh, and Mr. Mahesh has one more question. So I'll unmute Mr. Mahesh and he'll ask. Mr.
Hello.
Mahesh, unmute yourself and
Mahesh, you can go ahead.
Yeah, can you all hear me? I'm Dr. Mahesh Upmani here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Especially, I'm really enlightened by the way, the whole speech was given, especially Mr. Shashank Rande. Grateful. Sir, like, as you said, depends on the kind of startup. Now, I was just listening to what you were talking, for the last 30 minutes. I was really completely into it, and the thing which I finally wanted to ask you is the focus that you said that most of the healthcare startups do not have a focus, especially if you talk of an oncologist. You're mainly focused on oncology only, and probably your focus is lost somewhere later on. Now, I have a question for you right now, because our startup is completely new. It runs like a parallel system with the traditional allopathic medication, wherein disease management is the aim, whereas our startup believes in preventive healthcare using a diagnosis tool, which involves a voice recording of just 30 seconds and gives you a full body scan. Now, we are facing a dilemma right now for much time now, like where to approach. If I approach an investor, he tells me to go to a doctor who doesn't understand what this concept is, because most of the doctors, I belong to medical fraternity and I understand the problems of this particular fraternity profession, wherein we are taught right from the beginning to think of disease and its management, not to cure it, not to prevent it, rather. So as a startup which is in preventive healthcare using diagnosis tools, this is a major issue with us, and I would really like your comment on how it can be solved, where to go, how to pitch. Everything seems to be okay, but nothing seems to be right for us because nobody understands what exactly the concept is. So the pitch for the technology is okay, but business sometimes not okay. So I would like to have your input on this, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mahesh, for the question. Preventive healthcare is a very, very interesting space for all investors. So I'm surprised that there hasn't been much interest. Maybe it's a function of where you are at in terms of your competition analysis. Your feature by feature analysis for the investor in vis-a-vis compared to other competitors. But preventive healthcare is something which is of deep interest to a lot of investors right now. And it really boils down to whether you're looking at first check or you're looking at, you've raised some money and you've reached a certain point. It could be either a function of whether, they feel that they want to track you in terms of, seeing your traction for some time before they go ahead and invest, or other parameters. Okay. But your space is very much in demand. So okay. I don't think so you need to feel dejected by the opportunity, because it is a huge opportunity. Again, I haven't looked at your business. I'm just saying this based on the industry you've mentioned.
Yeah.
But it's a space definitely of interest to Indian investors, and it's a good opportunity.
Well, to sum it up, sir, thank you so much, for all the encouragement and motivation, which as a doctor, I can appreciate from coming right from the horse's mouth, who has so much of knowledge. We are a startup, especially preventive healthcare, which is the first of its kind in the whole of world, and it is entirely made in India, based on my 13-year-old research. So I would definitely be, sending my pitch to you on your email, which you have given, and I definitely require a guidance, sir. Thank you so much.
Sure, happy to evaluate.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mahesh. We could be also in touch if at all some some suggestions or some advice are there. We can give you from the incubation side and then perhaps forward it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Prati, do we have some other questions?
Yes. So the next question we have is, how can you identify investors' intentions in selecting the right investor for our startup?
I'll let Sparsh take this up first, and then maybe I can add.
Sure. So I've turned off my camera. Maybe that will solve issues.
That would be helpful. Yeah.
So see, at the end, when obviously you can't read somebody's mind. So then the question is that how do you understand what's in the investor's mind? So if you were going through the slides that Shashank was showing, you might have noticed one thing, right? That sometimes the hiring happens on past performance. Sometimes the hiring happens on the hunger and the hustle that the person has, and then the pros and cons of that. Maybe when looking at investors from maybe when startups look at investors, maybe the story can be flipped. One of the clearest indication of investors' worth that I've found is basically their past performance. And I know that doesn't mean that anybody who does not have a huge portfolio is not a good investor, but it is just that when you are a startup, it is a ease of life filter that you can very easily put. But then obviously the knife cuts both ways, because the more established and well-known a VCs or investor is, then they themselves would be equally picky, and their attention would be equally competitive, right? Now, I think if to give a generalistic understanding of where to understand whether the investor is right for you or not, is alignments of few critical parameters. First is obviously what is the intention behind the investment horizon. You need to understand these concepts. Secondly, do they sometimes when angel investments happen, I've seen in past experience, and obviously me a bit biased, but I'll always suggest that in case you can raise money from institutional avenues, they generally are better. They generally are people who know what they are talking about. They're worth their salt. So that becomes a very good indicator. Just go after people who are institutional, who have a past experience in the ecosystem, who are here to stay and not just make quick bucks and exit, and that will pretty much put you in a right spot.
I think adding to that, Sparsh has covered the points. Adding to that would be now that you've decided which institutional investor you want to go after, the best way to understand is most of the information is available on their website in terms of which sectors they're focusing. So whether they're sector agnostic or they're B2B focused or whatever, that is the beginning step. Second is talk to their portfolios. They've funded, right? Speak to somebody at those companies, and you'll get the true sense of what the fund. What the investment manager has done or the fund has done for that company. And that's one of the beginning points for you to track the company's progress and then speak with somebody at the company to understand that.
Yeah, Shashank, I'll just add on to that. So something very interesting happened a few months ago. I was just on a call and Anil was there, and the company that we were looking at, the founder was asking the same question, that I'm really interested in India Ventures, but I just want to understand where you're coming from, what your mindset is, which is a very genuine question. And I really like the answer that Anil gave. So Anil said that, a lot of people ask you to go and talk to their successful portfolio companies. I ask you the opposite. Go and talk to the portfolio companies that have not done so well and then go and ask them how Anil was, or how Bhaskar was, or how Sparsh was, or how Unicorn Ventures was, right? And that is in a sense the last litmus test, right? Somebody we invested in, it did not pan out the way it was supposed to pan out, and then post that fact, go and ask them for a feedback. So that, I think, is the final test.
So before we ask other questions, one question I have, which I have been facing, from startups off and on, basically, so what stage startup should approach an investment? So I get this question all of the time, when people say, बहुत अच्छा idea है, investment कैसे raise करूं? So what stage you think is the right stage when startups should be approaching investors till the time they perhaps should be bootstrapping and managing on their own? So any of you?
The longer they delay, the better. If they can grow with their own money, and they're bootstrapped and they're able to kind of get the first set of clients, a decent set of clients, they should continue on that path. They should start approaching investors when they've realized that they really want to amplify their network and amplify their growth. So if it's a global fund, and they want, let's say, go to the US geography, who's going to help them out besides just the money? Money is the most easiest. I think it's the most important factor is how can one type of investor or fund help you achieve your goals. So once you've got that clarity in mind, in terms of, that you want to scale and you want to grow big, and not only do you require capital, but you also require market access to penetrate these markets and just expand, is when I would recommend that you should start looking at money, or you should start looking at investors. There are other, and we've had both kind of founders. The first type and the second type has been where founders have been, and I think, Sparsh's portfolio company is also a great example, which also helped. Anil's a good friend, and we've at an early stage, we've also incorporated the hardware thesis. Unicorn was one of the first investors in investing in this robotics company, which was in sewage cleaning. Brilliant portfolio company, brilliant investment, and actually solving the genuine problem. And even at our portfolio, we've gone ahead and invested in companies like Accio Robotics or Jetson Robotics, which are, Jetson Robotics is a rooftop cleaning solar panel startup. And these companies, what they had their first, so the hardware startups are, difficult to build out. And theirs was an approach where they needed market validation, to kind of figure out how they can build out 12 to 15 units. I'm talking about Jetson Robotics right now, right? And the second case is that, can we get them some access points where, a company like Jetson, didn't have ready usage, ready buyers in India, and they had use cases in Middle East. So could we help them over there? I remember speaking with Anil, when I met him in Kerala 1.5 years ago, the last time. And I remember that they invested in this company, and their initial buyers were, correct me if I'm wrong, Sparsh, they're government, municipal corporation. Yeah. I'm sure it must. Gen Robotics. I'm not sure whether they have still. It could have pivoted into B2B, but a B2G company in robotics, and a VC coming in and investing in that is very, very unlikely. VCs tend to stay away from business to government business, and that to hardware. So, so it really depends on who's willing to take that first bet to kind of help you go to the next level. If it's a hardware startup, you might want to kind of bring in a player who can help you expand the network, rather than waiting to kind of build out the 15, 16 and then rolling it out. And in some cases, bootstrapping all the way is good till the time you're very confident that your product is ready, it's been adopted in a certain segment, and you now want to take it to the next level of market. So both cases. But I love for Sparsh to share some insights on Gen Robotics, but I think it's a great example of a fund which actually did, took a bold step in investing, and I think it paid off also. It's a great company, and it's a great use case.
Yeah. So obviously, so the company that Shashank was mentioning is called Gen Robotics. They basically create manhole cleaning robots, and now they've expanded into the health segment, and now they're creating rehabilitation robots for paraplegic patients. Obviously, when we did the initial investment, it was the lowest ticket size investment we had done from our first fund, this particular company, and now it's one of our star portfolio companies, right? So phenomenal growth, obviously, and that is where the beauty lies, right? So when they were initially raising money, it was not the largest ticket size that they raised. What they raised was what they needed. And that is, in essence, what my suggestion would be to everybody is that, see, raising capital is not a competition. I think in the ecosystem, I've started to get a feeling that for founders, and also, coming as two times failed entrepreneur myself, so I think capital raising has become a competition on whether, who can raise the largest funds. And I think that is the antithesis of what a startup is supposed to be. You should, and I know it's scary. I know it's scary to always be on, let's say, a 12-month deadline or an 18-month deadline. I understand that, right? But that is the right way to do it. Only raise the amount that you want to raise, and only raise when you need to raise. And what I mean by that is, maybe your company is not growing, right? And then you say that, okay, you know what, my company is not growing and maybe I need capital, and that is the problem. And that is the misidentification problem that I see a lot of entrepreneurs do. Maybe the problem is in a go-to-market strategy, right? Maybe your product is a fundamental misfit, right, for the market. Maybe there are 10 number of different problems which capital alone won't be solving. And if you go behind just raising capital and just thinking that for every problem that you face, capital raising a solution, you will end up in a thick mess very soon. So only one sentence of advice that I always tell everybody: only raise if you need it to be, and have a very unbiased, unpassionate analysis of that particular fact. And it's very tough to do, but needs to be done.
Thank you, Sparsh. So Ayush, Krati, will take one last question. I think we have over short time, so we'll take one last question.
So there's a one hand raise from Mr. Rishabh Raj. I guess he want to ask some question. I'll unmute him and he'll ask.
Rishabh, are you there?
We have a question in the chat box. I'll just read it to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
This question is, how get valuation of startups when Sigma is the only risk factor that we include?
I'm sorry, I did not get the question.
Yeah, neither did I. Is the question, how do you value your startup?
His question is, how get valuation of startups only Sigma is risk factor that we include?
I have no idea what this means.
So
are you talking about CAPM? Are you talking about like
valuation basically? So if you could talk about a little bit.
See, understood. So understood, Ronald. So see, I think the person who asking the question is basically asking about the beta and then the sigma of all these CAPMs and all the financial models. See, understand this, and this is me coming from a investment banking background. I have done a lot of these things, and the moment I left investment banking was the last time I used this. Okay. So beta and sigma, right, and risk factor of the market and assured returns. Those things are either, in my humble opinion, academic or applicable only in public markets or very large institutional markets, which VC is not. So and then the question becomes like, how do you value the company?
Evaluate.
And I always give the most disappointing answers. It's magic. It's an art form. What you need to do is you need to go and talk to everybody who is willing to talk to you, and then discover what your price is. Because of the fact that this is a private market, price discovery cannot happen the way it happens in a stock exchange, of course. So how does it happen? You need to create your own market. And what does it mean from a financial perspective? Is basically you need to go and talk to everybody who is a participant in the market, and then see what's the best value that you can get for your company. And then obviously the investor would also be doing the same thing, right? Because at the end, it's all business from both ends. So yeah.
So guys, at our fund, we've delegated the task to unicorns of the world in determining the valuation. And because we are not valuing the company, we are doing it through this instrument called, it's SAFE instrument is nothing but a convertible preference share, and it gets converted whenever you raise the next round. And our objective of doing this is because we're coming in very early. Sometimes companies are not making revenue. मैं कैसे value करूँगा, right? So we are taking a punt, we are taking a bet, and our objective is to help the company grow. So we try and get them more metric driven and get them on a month-to-month recurring revenue business, and then we basically leave it to Sparsh and team to determine by value up decide karo jo fund karna hai. But see, there's a place where we are at. So we are at the bottom of the pyramid where we want to kind of pull out companies early on and give them the seed capital without assigning a valuation. It gets converted. Koi 10 million pe karega, koi 2 million pe karega, koi 0 pe karega, right? And funds like Sparsh's and growth stage funds, and you all have heard the names. They will judge you on your performance. Bhai, aap month on month kitna grow kar rahe ho. And so the only advice to the founders is that don't worry about valuation. Worry about jo aapne banaya hai, kya wo bik raha hai, kya wo consistently grow kar raha hai. Are you growing in a market? Are you capturing enough market? Do you have the users or the customer stickiness? The first 1 year, 1.5 year, or the first one funding round, your focus needs to be that, not valuation. Valuation is a function of what you've built, and when you're building something, it needs to sell, it needs to become scalable, it needs to have stickiness. Those are the things which founders should be focusing on at your stage and not worrying about valuation. And as you said, right, Paki sab theoretical hai. So once you reach that level, once you reach a pre-series A, series A round, that is the time when the actual valuation discussions come in. By then you have become experienced in knowing kind of a few people to get a few opinions. Even then it's very fluid. Investors will have a certain determined factors, certain metrics on which they'll value your company. Your CA or your valuation expert will have something else. You being a product founder, you'll be like, mujhe abhi bhi nahi malum mera valuation kya hai, but mere ko itna business hai. So it's a function of all that. As a founder, you need to be focused on generating revenue, getting your product out there, figuring out the stickiness, and continuously getting an incremental month-to-month growth in whatever capacity, whether it's a B2C business, B2B. That's my input. Sparsh, feel free to add, but I'm, in this value chain, this is how it's happening. Hence, as a fund, we've decided not to value a company. If I value a company, let's say at 5 CR, 10 CR, and if they get funded and then they go to Sparsh and Sparsh like, boss, aapne to itna revenue bhi nahi kara hai, aapko 5 CR ki valuation kya hai? We don't want to get into that. Our focus is to ensure that for a 5 CR valuation or a 10 CR valuation, can you get me number of sales? Can you get these kind of clients, 10 clients, 15 clients every month? And hence we are providing you that initial capital to kind of ensure that you are doing those things and you don't have bottlenecks. So there's a function where, and even incubation centers for that matter, right? They're providing you this seed capital, these grants, so that you're more ready on the valuation side. But so if you are at an early stage, you should not be asking this question. If you raised one round and let's say you're doing hypothetically, 10 lakhs upwards or 50 lakhs upwards per month or quarter in revenue, then yes, slowly the valuation will come into picture. But even then, your focus has to be, can you continuously grow for the next 3 years at a month-to-month growth projection? वो फिर भी आपके mind में वो हमेशा रहना चाहिए. Because that is where the end game is from a founder's perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll end questions Q&A session. I mean, this was very interactive. The Q&A session went over very well. I mean, a lot of questions were there. We try to answer unanswered question in future also. And thanks a lot, Shashank and Sparsh, for taking time out and speaking to our startups. I hope this session would be giving them some insight on preparing for planning their investment in future, the funding process in future. So thanks a lot, Shashank, and thanks a lot, Sparsh, for taking time out. And thank you, participants also. We will be having multiple sessions where you will be guided through you will be mentored through the process. And then there will be a grand finale, which dates and all we'll be sharing with you. So thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ronald, and thanks, team, for inviting me. And good to connect again, Sparsh. Looking forward to meeting you soon.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.